At 60, you reach a point in life where you've already lived through decades of expectations, proving yourself to employers, family, and society. The beautiful truth is that this season offers freedom. You don't have to prove your worth anymore. You know who you are. And from this place of grounded self-acceptance, you can finally make choices that are about joy, fulfillment, and authenticity, not about earning approval. When you reach 60, something profound happens. You wake up and realize you've been carrying invisible weights for decades. From childhood, you were told who you should be, how you should behave, what success should look like, and how your life should unfold. And for most of us, we spent our 20s, 30s, 40s, even 50s running on that treadmill, chasing validation, approval, and applause from people who often didn't even understand our journey. But at 60, the truth becomes impossible to ignore. You don't need to prove yourself anymore. You've already proven that you can survive storms. You've proven that you can rise after heartbreak. You've proven that you can build, rebuild, and sometimes start again from scratch. You've proven that you are resilient, strong, and still standing. This realization is powerful because for the first time, you're free to live life on your own terms. Think about it. When you were younger, maybe you took a job you hated because it looked respectable. Maybe you stayed in relationships that drained you because walking away felt like failure. Maybe you sacrificed your passions because the world told you they were unrealistic. But at 60, you can finally lay those chains down. You can start over without the noise of trying to please everybody else. Starting over now isn't about proving you're successful. It's about proving to yourself that you're still alive, still curious, still capable of joy. You no longer need to perform for an audience. You no longer need to meet anyone else's standards. You can take risks without worrying about whether someone will approve. You can say no without guilt and yes without hesitation. And here's the deeper beauty. When you release the pressure of proving yourself, you unlock the freedom to create authentically. You don't paint to impress. You paint because it heals you. You don't write to be famous. You write because your soul has a story. You don't travel to post pictures online. You travel to feel alive again. At 60, starting over isn't about chasing status. It's about embracing significance. It's about understanding that your worth was never in your achievements, your titles, or your possessions. Your worth is in simply being, in the way you touch lives, in the love you give, in the courage you embody. So hear this truth clearly. You have nothing left to prove. That is why starting over at 60 is not weakness, it's strength. It is not failure, it is freedom. When you are 60, you stand at a vantage point that no book, no seminar, and no shortcut could ever give you. Wisdom doesn't arrive in a single moment. It is carved into you over years of living, stumbling, learning, and getting back up again. And this wisdom is what makes starting over at this stage not only possible, but extraordinary. Think about it. When you were in your 20s, you thought you knew everything. Life seemed wide open, but your perspective was narrow. You chased opportunities without understanding their cost. You trusted people simply because they smiled. You believed success was about money, titles, or things you could show off. But then came life, real life. The heartbreaks, the betrayals, the failures, the losses, and also the moments of joy, love, and triumph. Each experience became a teacher. Every mistake became a classroom. Every disappointment became a chapter. By 60, you are not naive anymore. You can discern the difference between noise and wisdom, between shallow relationships and real love, between busyness and true purpose. And that's the gift. You get to start over with clarity. When you begin again at 60, you aren't wandering blindly. You're guided by decades of lessons. You know the red flags that once fooled you. You know the traps that used to lure you in. You know how to recognize what aligns with your spirit and what drains it. That's not something a younger person starting over can fully grasp. It's the unique strength of this stage in life. Wisdom also brings patience, At 60, you understand that good things take time and you don't panic when results don't show up immediately. You're less reactive, more reflective. You don't jump at every opportunity. You weigh it against your values, your peace, and your joy. Starting over from this place of patience makes your next chapter sustainable, not just exciting. And let's not forget compassion. Wisdom softens the heart. After decades of life, you know pain is universal, and it has made you more empathetic. When you start over at 60, you are more likely to build with love, with kindness, with generosity. You've learned that success without compassion feels empty. So hear me clearly. The wisdom you now carry is your greatest asset. It is your compass, your shield, your anchor. Starting over at 60 isn't like starting over at 20. At 20, you start with energy. At 60, you start with wisdom, and wisdom always wins. One of the greatest gifts of turning 60 is that time stops being an abstract concept. It becomes real, tangible, and deeply precious. When you're younger, time feels infinite. You think there will always be another chance, another season, another tomorrow. Oh, start over. You put off dreams, delay conversations, and postpone joy, believing you can circle back whenever you want. But at 60, something shifts. You recognize that time is not endless. You begin to measure it differently, not in decades, but in moments. And instead of this realization bringing fear, it brings focus. It sharpens your vision. It helps you cut through distractions and get honest about what truly matters. When you start over at 60, you no longer waste time on what doesn't serve you. You stop entertaining relationships that drain your energy. You stop saying yes to obligations that only fill your schedule but empty your soul. You stop running after things that look impressive but feel hollow. You become intentional every hour, every day. Every choice is weighed against the question, does this bring peace? Does this bring purpose? Does this bring joy? And that's what makes starting over at this age so powerful. You don't have the illusion of endless time, but you do have the wisdom to make the most of the time you have. A younger person might start over with speed, but at 60, you start over with precision. You know how to place your energy exactly where it counts. Understanding the value of time also means embracing presence. At this stage, you realize life is not lived in the future you're chasing or the past you regret. It's lived in the present moment. Starting over at 60 means you're more likely to pause and savor the sunrise, to linger in laughter, to be fully present in conversations. You no longer rush through life. You taste it, you hold it, you honor it. And here's the deeper truth. When you value time, you begin to value yourself. You understand that your time is your life. Who you give it to, where you spend it, and how you invest it reflects how much you respect yourself. At 60, you carry the courage to say, my time is sacred, and I will no longer waste it on things that diminish me. That's why 60 is the perfect age to start over, because you will not waste the second half of your life the way you may have spent parts of the first. You will protect your time, use it wisely, and live it fully. And in that decision, you'll find more joy in one intentional year than in 10 years of rushing without purpose. One of the quietest prisons most of us live in is comparison. From the moment we are children, we're measured against someone else. How quickly we learn, how well we perform, how much we achieve, how far we rise. By the time we enter adulthood, comparison is stitched into the fabric of our lives. We scroll through other people's highlight reels. We measure our progress against neighbors, coworkers, even siblings. We look sideways more than we look inward. But at 60, something miraculous happens. You get tired of carrying that weight. You realize that comparison is not only exhausting, it's meaningless. You see that everyone's journey is different, and trying to measure your chapter against someone else's is like comparing a sunrise to a sunset. They're both beautiful, but they were never meant to look the same. Starting over at 60 comes with this freedom. You no longer need to match anyone else's timeline. You don't have to compete for recognition or chase someone else's version of success. You've lived long enough to see that the people you once envied often struggled behind closed doors. You've lived long enough to know that appearances don't equal happiness. That wisdom breaks the chains of comparison and gives you the courage to finally define life on your own terms. At this stage, you don't care if your neighbor buys a bigger house, you don't care if your old friend retires earlier, or if someone younger makes more money. Those things lose their power over you because you've discovered that peace cannot be bought and fulfillment cannot be fake. You've seen too much to confuse wealth with worth or popularity with purpose. This freedom also allows you to start over with authenticity. You no longer build a life to impress anyone else. You build it to satisfy your soul. You don't launch a business to prove you're still relevant. You do it because the idea excites you. You don't take a trip to show off photos. You do it because the adventure makes you feel alive. You don't chase titles or accolades. You chase meaning. Comparison thrives on scarcity. It whispers there's not enough for everyone. If they succeed, you lose. But at 60, you know better. You've seen how life works. You know there's abundance, there are seasons, and there's room for everyone's story. That truth sets you free to cheer for others without shrinking yourself. So why is 60 the perfect age to start over? Because you finally step out of the invisible competition that has drained you for decades. You stop racing and start living. You stop imitating and start creating. You stop measuring and start savoring. And in that freedom, you discover a joy that comparison could never give you. One of the greatest revelations you gain by the time you reach 60 is clarity in your relationships. For decades, many of us move through life surrounded by crowds, family, colleagues, acquaintances, friends from different seasons. At times, we confuse proximity with loyalty. We assume that because people are around us, they are for us. We assume that shared history always means shared heart. But life has a way of revealing the truth. Over the years, storms expose the foundations of relationships. When you succeed, you discover who claps sincerely and who claps reluctantly. When you struggle, you discover who shows up and who disappears. By 60, you've already lived through enough of those seasons to know exactly who belongs in your circle and who is only mean to be in your crowd. That clarity is a gift, because when you start over at this stage of life, you don't have to waste energy on people who drain you, manipulate you, or secretly resent you. You've seen the signs before. You know what it feels like to be used, to be ignored, or to be taken for granted. And because of that, you enter this new chapter with a sharper filter. You protect your peace by protecting your space. At 60, you have the courage to let go of relationships that no longer serve your soul. That doesn't always mean anger or bitterness. It often means acceptance. You stop trying to force people to be who they cannot be. You stop begging for love that should be freely given. You stop excusing behavior that consistently wounds you. Instead, you open yourself to the kind of relationships that nurture, encourage, and strengthen you. And here's the beauty. As your relationships become clearer, they also become deeper. You may have fewer people around you, but the ones who remain are the ones who truly matter. You discover the richness of quality over quantity. A handful of genuine friends at 60 feels more valuable than 100 shallow connections at 30. This clarity also helps you redefine love. You stop chasing conditional relationships where your worth depends on performance. You stop tolerating one-sided friendships where you give endlessly but receive little. Instead, you cultivate mutuality, where love flows both ways, where respect is shared, where kindness is the default, not the exception. So why is 60 the perfect age to start over? Because you start over with your tribe, your real people, those who cheer for you without envy, those who listen without judgment, those who walk with you even when the road gets hard. You don't rebuild your life with an audience, you rebuild it with a family of the heart. And when your relationships are clearer, your spirit becomes light. You no longer carry the weight of fake connections. You no longer exhaust yourself trying to keep people who were never meant to stay. You move into your new beginning surrounded by truth, loyalty, and love. And that, more than anything, makes the second chapter of life sweeter than the first. For so much of life, we are held hostage by obligations. In our 20s and 30s, we are often building careers, families, reputations. We say yes to opportunities even when they crush us because we believe we have to. We sacrifice joy because responsibility demands it. We trade authenticity for approval and passion for stability. By our 40s and 50s, obligations multiply. Bills, mortgages, family duties, community expectations, even the silent pressure to appear as though we are doing it all. But something shifts when you reach 60. You begin to see the heavy cost of living a life driven only by obligation. You look back and notice the moments you missed because you were too busy keeping up with demands. The vacations you postponed, the hobbies you buried, the laughter you silenced, and it hits you. Life is not meant to be a checklist of duties. It is meant to be experienced. Starting over at 60 gives you permission to choose differently. You are no longer bound by the same pressures. The children are grown, the career ladder no longer defines you, and the weight of proving yourself has lifted. Now you can finally place joy at the center. You can wake up and ask, what makes me feel alive? Instead of, what do I have to do to keep up? This doesn't mean you abandon responsibility. It means you rebalance it. You give yourself permission to prioritize what fills your spirit instead of what empties it. You may take a morning walk simply because it delights you. You may pick up that paintbrush, that guitar, that book you always meant to write. You may travel not to impress others, but to savor the world with fresh eyes. And here's the truth. When you start over from a place of joy, you also become a better presence in the lives of others. Joy makes you kinder, more patient, more compassionate. Obligation may have made you reliable, but joy makes you radiant. People don't just need you to show up. They need you to show up whole, alive, and present. At 60, you stop apologizing for wanting joy. You stop explaining why you don't want to attend every draining event or meet every unspoken expectation. You stop carrying guilt for saying no because you understand this simple but profound truth. Joy is not selfish. Joy is survival. Joy is what gives you strength to keep moving forward. Joy is what makes life worth starting over for. So why is 60 the perfect age to start over? Because you finally step into a season where joy is not a luxury, it is a priority. And when joy leads the way, obligation no longer feels like a prison, it becomes a choice. You start living not because you must, but because you can. And that shift transforms everything. Reaching 60 is not just about years lived, it's about storms survived. By this stage of life, you have endured things that once felt impossible. You have buried dreams, said goodbye to loved ones, faced heartbreak, disappointment, betrayal, illness, and setbacks that could have broken you. And yet you are still here. You didn't just survive, you carried on, even when carrying on felt like the hardest thing in the world. That survival has forged in you a courage that cannot be taught in books or learned in classrooms. It is the kind of courage that comes only from living through the fire and realizing the fire did not consume you. It's the courage of someone who has fallen flat, gotten up and kept walking. It's the courage of someone who has lost everything and still found reasons to smile again. At 60, starting over is not frightening. It's familiar because you've started over before, maybe after a job loss, maybe after a broken marriage, maybe after a health scare, maybe after a betrayal that forced you to rebuild your trust in people and yourself. You've done it in pieces, and now you have the strength to do it with intention. That history gives you confidence. If you made it through that, you can make it through this. The courage of survival also strips away fear of judgment. When you've seen the worst and endured it, you stop worrying about what people think. You stop caring about whispers, criticism, and comparisons. You've lived long enough to know that people will always talk, but their opinions can't define you. That freedom allows you to take bold steps at 60 without hesitation. You're not afraid to begin again, even if it looks unconventional. And here's the most powerful part. Survival gives you perspective. You understand that pain, as crushing as it feels, is temporary. You know that grief eventually shifts into gratitude, that endings can lead to beginnings, that brokenness often becomes the soil for growth. This perspective infuses your courage with hope. You don't just survive, you rebuild with faith that something meaningful lies ahead. So why is 60 the perfect age to start over? Because you've already proven to yourself that you can survive what others only fear. You carry scars, yes, but those scars are evidence of strength. You carry stories, not excuses. You carry wisdom, not bitterness. And all of that combines into a courage so steady, so resilient, that starting over feels less like a risk and more like a destiny. You are not starting from scratch. You are starting from survival. And survival gives you a power that makes you unstoppable. One of the most destructive lies society whispers is that after a certain age, your story is already finished, that your best chapters are behind you, that what you've done is all you'll ever do, that the book is closed. But at 60, you begin to see the truth. That lie was never yours to believe. Life is not a single straight line, and your story is not a book with only one ending. It is a series of chapters, and as long as you are breathing, you are still holding the pen. You can pause, you can turn the page, and yes, you can start writing a brand new story. This is why starting over at 60 is not a tragedy, but a triumph. You've lived enough life to know that change is not failure, it's evolution. You are not the same person you were at 20, 30, or 40. Why should your story remain the same? Every season of life calls for a new narrative, and at 60, you have the rare gift of seeing the old story with clarity while having the courage to write something new. It doesn't matter if the first half of your life was filled with mistakes, missed chances, or pain. You are not bound to repeat those chapters. You are not trapped in the roles others assigned you. You are not limited by what you didn't do. The beauty of starting over at 60 is that you can choose a different plot. You can live a story of joy instead of duty, freedom instead of fear, love instead of loneliness, courage instead of regret. And perhaps the most liberating truth is this: the story you write now doesn't have